Most people would describe the youth of today as being very light, like you can blow them over. You look at them the wrong way and they fall apart and they crumble. And if resilience is truly as important as we say it is, then I think we ought to figure out what resilience really means and why.
Some people struggle with resilience, like myself included, because I struggle with perfectionism. And so when things don't go well, I get really stuck in that down space. And I have a hard time, like, okay, the same way that the good, I get the good, and the same way that the negative eventually passes.
The most important thing we can do in terms of building resilience within our families is helping our children understand their family narrative. Hi, I'm Menachem Lehrfield.
And I'm Sarah Lehrfield.
And this is reConnect, where we explore ancient insights for thriving relationships. Today, I want to talk a little bit about resilience.
That's a real tough one. Not my favorite.
No, not your favorite. Okay, well, I do think whether it's your favorite or not, it is an important topic. And I think resilience is one of the things we perhaps want most for our children.
Yeah, I think if you would ask parents what they want for their kids or how they want them to be in the world, I think that would be one of those qualities that are up there.
And yet we're seen to be raising the least resilient generation of all time.
Is that statistically proven? Is there any?
I think there's a lot of data to show, just if you look at first of all, just anecdotal data. I think most people would describe the current youth of today. I sound like an old person when I say that, but I think most people would describe the youth of today as being very light, like you can blow them over and you look at them the wrong way and they fall apart and they crumble. And if resilience is truly as important as we say it is, then I think we ought to figure out what resilience really means and why, as a generation of parents, again, not shifting the blame to the children, but as a generation of parents, what are we doing to contribute to the lack of resilience that we see? And if you look at Jewish history, resilience is really the one thing we have going for us. If there's one thing you can say about the Jewish people, is we are a resilient group of people.
For sure.
And a lot of that's not due to choice or design. It's just the nature of our history and all that we've been through.
Brutal and beautiful.
It is brutal and beautiful. And we'll talk about throughout this conversation, what resilience is, perhaps what it's not. I saw this really interesting, going back to some data. There's a study that came out of Emory University, so your hometown, by a man named Marshall Duke. And he explained that the most important thing we can do in terms of building resilience within our families is helping our children understand their family narrative, like where they come from. And he explains there's really three types of narratives. There's a narrative that describes kind of this downward trajectory, that we came from Europe and we had everything and we had wealth and we had success and everything was going great. And then we came over to this country and everything went downhill from there. It was very difficult, and that's why we have nothing today. On the flip side, he talks about a narrative where we came from nothing and we worked and we worked and we built ourselves up and we came over to this country with no opportunity and we started a small business and now it's this Fortune 500 company and we're fabulously wealthy and everything.
And it's employing the whole family and
the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
But then he talks about the narrative that he says is actually the one that produces the highest levels of resilience. And that's what he calls the oscillating family narrative. And what I love about that is it's really the Jewish story. So in his description, the oscillating family narrative is a narrative that describes the ups and the downs. We came to this country with nothing. We worked our way up and we built this business, and then it collapsed and fell apart. And your uncle went to jail, and going through the ups and the downs that happened to a particular family. But despite it all, we always stuck together as a family. And he says what that does, in general, sharing a family narrative gives a child and a person a greater sense of identity. and that identity is so crucial. But the oscillating family narrative in specific gives over the message to our children that there are going to be ups and downs in life. It's not all going to be smooth sailing and easy, but despite it all, no matter how many challenges we go through, we've always come out stronger as a result. And you look at the holiday of Passover, it's really all about sharing the family narrative. Mm-hmm. And you look back at Jewish history and wonder why and how we've managed to defy the odds and why we're still here so many thousands of years later. I think a big part of that, at least according to Dr. Duke, would be this idea of sharing the family narrative. Every single year, we get together with our extended family and we share our collective national narrative. We tell over the story.
And the ugly parts.
Yeah.
Right.
And the Torah, Jewish wisdom never ignores or sweeps under the rug the ugly parts. Yeah. We talk about the ugly parts. We talk about the ugly parts of our background and our history. We talk about the ugly parts of our leaders' personalities.
Our family origin.
Yeah.
The matriarch.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Talk about a soap opera.
Yeah.
If you would see some of the stories, and you would think if you're writing this down for posterity, and you're going to be handing this over and sharing it with your children, mm-hmm. Maybe let's not include that story. Mm-hmm. But yet it has everything. And it has the incest, and it has
sibling rivalry and nepotism and difficult dynamics.
Oh, the good, bad, and the ugly. Yeah. And it includes those things as part of that story, I think, because that's who we are. Mm-hmm. And it's this awareness that we get stronger every time we have to deal with those challenges and those difficulties.
You're describing the oscillating narrative and the ups and the downs that really ultimately define who we are, help us write our story. I feel like that reminded me of this Blue episode I watched recently with the kids. I think it was the last episode that they created. And it was an episode where Bluey was trying to kind of navigate her feelings around potentially moving. And so at school, the teacher had read a book and it ended with "May live happily ever after." And Bluey said, "Are all endings like happily ever after? Does everything always end good?" Because she was really struggling with this and she didn't know how it would end. And the teacher said, "Here, I'm going to read you a different book." And she read this book that kind of was like the story of this farmer, and he had different challenges and experiences. And every time that something good happened, right, the neighbors would come and be like, "Oh, it's really good that that happened." And he would respond with, "We'll see." And then
this is actually from the Talmud.
Oh,
well, go on.
Okay. And then
most things.
And then when that good thing led to something challenging, the neighbors would say, "Oh, that's really bad that happened." And the farmer would say, "We'll see." And she went, like, the story goes back and forth, and then it just ends with, "We'll see." And Bluey was like, "Is that the end?" The kids were like, "How is that the end?" But I thought it was like so powerful to hear a story.
Brilliant.
First of all, like the "we'll see," that you're choosing to accept the inevitability of the fact that you will not know what you're going to face. And you will not know even how capable you could be of facing it. It is inevitable. It is written into your story. It is, imbued into life that you will have these ups and downs. And so it's like already like that kind of acceptance of that, an understanding of like, I think some people struggle with resilience, like myself included, because I struggle with perfectionism. And so when things don't go well, I get really stuck in that down space. And I have a hard time, like, okay, the same way that I get the good, and the same way that the negative eventually passes, it's like that up and down. It's like I can get stuck in that down, and it really, really takes me down. The expectation should be that nothing is 100% perfect, and that there's going to be ups and downs. You're setting yourself up for success, and I think resilience, when you're already accepting the fact that, like, we celebrate challenges and we celebrate victories.
Yeah, and one of the things I love about the Talmud or Louis episode,
which one is your Bible? Yes.
Is this idea that also you don't even know, you're talking about the ups and the downs, you don't even know which ones are ups and downs. Mm-hmm. So often in life, we look at a situation, we look at a scenario, we think like, oh, I know this is good. I know this is bad. Mm-hmm. And often we can look back with a little more perspective, and we can see that's not at all the way it really was.
Yeah. Or almost like if we don't give so much like energy to it, like almost like there's a neutrality, like we'll see. Will it be good? Will it not be good? Will I get through this? Will it not? Is this really going to be difficult or not? There's like, is this going to be the rest of my life or not? And I think that sort of, instead of it flooding you or overwhelming you, or you on this really, really big high with your success, then when it crashes or when things change, it's so much more difficult to kind of navigate. So it's like hopefully wiring into your children's brain and your own as you're having these kinds of conversations is like challenges and victories are a given. That is life. Mm-hmm. And to expect anything else is not fair to yourself.
Right. Really just having that expectation. But I think also reframing challenges not as a bad thing. You know, you make fun of me every morning, but as the kids are going off to school and I shout, at them as they're getting into the carpool and I say, be kind, ask good questions and look for challenges.
Yeah.
Right.
And we do it at our dinner table. It's more like mistakes. What mistakes?
We ask what challenges they had throughout their day. Yeah. But then that's part of it also is reframing challenges. So as our kids come home from school and instead of asking them, did you have fun today? I'll ask, did you have any challenges? And if one of my kids says, no, and we say, that's so sad. You didn't have an opportunity to grow your soul today, or you didn't have an opportunity to grow your brain today.
Transform.
Because we really need to look at challenges as opportunities for growth.
I just want to be clear. Almost every time we ask our children that question, we don't get the answer we're looking for. They almost always respond that they weren't challenged, even if they were potentially challenged in school. I just think it's a good thing for them to hear over and over again, like that question.
And every once in a while,
we get it. We strike gold. Happens once in a while.
Ultimately, resilience is all about being able to deal with the discomfort of
distress
and distress.
Distress tolerance.
And that's what resilience is. And that's what builds resilience.
So I think like the harder that distress tolerance is for you, then the harder it's going to be for you to accept your child's distress. So I have a very hard time with distress tolerance. It makes me, I'm not comfortable being uncomfortable. I'm working at it, but it's a state that is very difficult for me. And I found in my parenting that when I see my kids struggle, I very quickly want to swoop in and help because I can't handle that distress. My own distress tolerance is really low. And so when my kid is struggling, I am not giving over kind of the right framework because internally it's something that I haven't navigated myself. And so what ends up happening is we end up like swooping in and saving the kid and getting involved in the friendship dynamics or fixing stuff that's going on at school and all that.
It's also a lot easier.
Yeah.
It's so much easier to swoop in and resolve the issue.
Yeah.
Or tell the kid to do this or not do that.
Yeah.
Than to let them figure it out on their own or
just to even feel some of the feelings that I'm feeling. I think that's Dr. Becky Kennedy, who's like our parenting guru. She's the Moses of parenting. She talks a lot about the best way to help your child develop resilience, and also the best way for you is to really the opposite of what we would think, right? When we think of resilience, we think of a kid falling and the parents like, get up, you got this. Like, don't, kick the kid back or start running, or they're like screaming or yelling. And it could be very encouraging. But she says it's really the opposite, that when you take that moment where there's a potential failure or a fall or a difficulty or a challenge, and you kind of validate and empathize with the feelings that they're feeling, then what you're doing is creating, and you're communicating to them that you are with them in the feelings that they're feeling. Those feelings are okay to feel. They're a part of you. And, and it's important to acknowledge them and see them and understand them. And then when you're kind of, what they're doing is experiencing those feelings with a parent or with a person who is safe, and that creates a very safe and secure space for them to feel those feelings. And then they're, most importantly, not alone in those feelings. And so I think that actually gives them permission to like, okay, this is really hard. This feels really uncomfortable. I feel like I'm failing. I don't feel like this is a good reflection of who I am. I'm embarrassed. I'm ashamed. And the parent kind of like sits in some of those feelings with them and is like, yeah, it's hard and it's uncomfortable. And I've had experiences like that and I really didn't like it. And then creating that kind of space where they're feeling these feelings, they're not alone in these feelings. And then they kind of have the courage and the ability to potentially keep moving forward, like to really access that resilience. Because I think instead of like what we're actually doing is almost creating like this lab for them to be able to safely or securely fail. And then as they grow up and get into the world, it's less so, but they've created that own lab internally inside of them.
You're saying instead of like minimizing the challenge, which we often instinctively do.
Yeah. We minimize the feelings around the challenge.
We instead give them the space to feel those feelings.
Yeah. And we validate them and we sit with them, which also kind of can see right through us. So if we don't do that for ourselves, then they're not going to.
Right. But it's also very hard at that moment. Like I remember when I was teaching the kids how to ride bikes, you know, there's this knee-jerk reaction to be like, easy peasy. I think of all the expressions out there, the one I hate the most is the easy peasy, because it does the exact opposite of everything we're talking about. I'd much rather my child think this actually is really hard and really challenging, but I could do hard things than it's so easy.
Yeah.
And you hear kids saying that a lot when they do something they weren't able to do a year ago.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, easy peasy.
Yeah.
I wonder how much of that is, how much is nature, how much is nurture?
Yeah.
How much of that is like a learned behavior?
Almost like that. If it's like that's like an accomplishment.
Right.
Right.
Which it really shouldn't be.
Right.
You know, the effort that they put forth, that they build upon to get to where they are now, is something that should be praised and something that should be valued. And we'll talk probably in a further episode all about effort and the importance of effort. But I think just from a resilience perspective it's like almost like, how do you encourage your child to take risks? Right.
Will they fail? Will they succeed? We'll see. But that shouldn't, whatever the outcome is going to be, shouldn't determine whether or not they're going to try it. And we have, I think this has been something very important to you in our parenting. Me less so, because I struggle with it on my own. And most of the things that you're right, the things that are like require a tremendous amount of resilience, I usually hand that job over to you. Like anything that's gonna require a kid to really fail and fall.
Or to watch them fall and fail.
I can't watch. I have to like hide. I can't. It's very, very difficult. And I think that is probably one of my biggest struggles, is struggling with failure and struggling to be able to try again or try something different or get back up and push forward as an evolved person with new tools and new insights about myself and, and the world through my experiences. I find that like a difficult thing and something that I'm really working on.
So you're saying it's not really so much about them being uncomfortable. It's really about you sitting in the discomfort, watching them be uncomfortable, watching them
as
fail.
A parent.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think that's why it's so hard for me, because I'm just uncomfortable with distress. And even in myself, like I think about how passionate you've been about inspiring our kids to be more resilient. And I've seen you take risks professionally and personally in your own growth. And it's very inspiring. And it's mostly inspiring because I notice that you're just not results driven. You're just, the goal for you is just to try something. And it may fail and it may not fail, but through that process, there's a lot of learning that happens about yourself, and it kind of like it's uncomfortable. And I know we have one of our kids is particularly good at this, and I think a lot of times we get feedback from our teachers that she'll put her hand up, she's willing to answer a question, put herself out there, share an idea that she may not fully understand, or she may not have the right answer to, but she's okay with it if it's wrong. And like when the teacher describes that to me, I feel uncomfortable inside. I don't think I've ever had the courage to really answer a question that I didn't know for sure was correct, because it was so uncomfortable for me to have the wrong answer. And so then you just don't really answer questions, and you like, your voice gets quieter and quieter, and you just try less and less and put yourself out there less and less.
I'm saying resilience is being willing to take risks
at the expense of sitting in uncomfortable feelings, at like having a tolerance for
So I think it's
distress.
I think the biggest part of that, the thing that builds that
Yeah, I think the very
ability to sit in discomfort is this awareness that the discomfort, the challenges, the failures are not defining who I am as a person. They're not so scary. Right? The reason why failure is so scary is that we see it as this permanent condition.
or like I'm a failure, as opposed to this experience didn't work out.
Right.
Or this.
But to be able to understand that failure is separate from me, that it's part of the process, and that I cannot succeed without failure,
Yeah.
builds so much in terms of resilience. I think this awareness and this understanding that failure is actually a good thing, and failure is the building block of success, that's what allows us to sit in that discomfort, is because I know it's part of, like you said at the beginning, right? It's about that expectation. If I had the expectation that it's all going to be smooth sailing, so then, and failure is this bump in the road that detracts me from the desired result.
And it's disappointment.
So then of course it's going to be a difficult thing. But if I see failure as the thing that gets me to where I want to go, it's a different story.
Yeah.
One of the most powerful verses in all of Jewish wisdom and liturgy is this verse that describes the idea of falling. We say, Ki sheva yipol tzaddik v'kam, that the righteous fall 7 times. But what people forget when they're translating that verse is the word ki. It doesn't say that despite the falling, the wise one gets up. It's because of the falling that the wise person gets up. It's the falling over and over and over again, because I have fallen 7 times.
That's what makes you wise.
That's what makes me successful. I think the wise person, and the reason why wisdom comes into that, is that it takes wisdom to recognize that, yes, I've fallen 5 or 6 times, but if I stop now, then all I have is the failure.
But if I even more, you gain wisdom.
That's the point, is if I learn, that's the key, because is if I'm learning from each one of those failures, it's like what Thomas Edison said when they asked him about all of his failures developing the light bulb. He says, I didn't fail 1,000 times. I learned 1,000 times, 1,000 different ways how to not make a light bulb. Mm-hmm. Right? It's this understanding.
How it won't work.
Yeah. But all of that leads to where you are.
Yeah.
We have a similar verse that says, Kina falti kamti. Because I fall, I get up. It's the falling, it's the failure that leads me to the next step and the next step and the next step. One of my favorite quotes comes from a Nike ad with Michael Jordan. And it says, I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and I missed. I failed over and over and over again in my life, and that is why I succeed.
Right. Like when you think Michael Jordan, you think success.
Right. But, you know, it's a well-known fact that he was cut from his high school team. And so many people look at that and say, like, oh, that coach must feel really stupid. Mm-hmm. But the reality is the reason why he became Michael Jordan was because he was cut from his high school team. Because when he came home and he told his mom that he didn't make the team, she didn't say, oh, poor baby, or like what would happen today where the mom would call the coach and be like, how could you not, you know, take my son on your team? You don't know what you're doing.
We won't judge you if you do that.
We will. But if she would have done that, that he probably would have made the high school team, but he wouldn't have been Michael Jordan.
Right.
But instead, she said, here's a basketball. You didn't make the team because you weren't good enough yet. Mm-hmm. Go practice. Mm-hmm. And he did. And those failures and those setbacks are what made him who he was. And that's true with all of the greats. Mm-hmm. Now, we're obsessed with this idea of the overnight success. The problem is it doesn't really exist. And, you know, you look at all these people. You look at Walt Disney, who was told he wasn't creative enough. You look at Oprah Winfrey, who was told she wasn't fit for television. All of these people who face these huge setbacks, those are the defining moments that made them who they were. But you look at the people in their lives, they're not people who said, oh, poor baby, they don't know what they're talking about, they don't know what they're missing. They sat with them in the discomfort and helped them realize that these setbacks and failures are going to one day propel you to become greater and better. They're part of the process of growth.
So like what happens after your child has a challenging situation, or they fail at something, or they're going through something difficult, and you validate and you empathize and you kind of maybe share a time that you felt those feelings and you validate those feelings and you give them a sense of like, let's get curious about what are those feelings and why could you be feeling them? That's part of you, and that these feelings are real, and I believe you that you're feeling this way. Then what happens?
I think the very act alone of destigmatizing failure and making failure not something scary, and a mistake is not something that's self-defining, right? You made a mistake, you are not a mistake.
Or even uncomfortable feelings aren't bad either.
And
like getting that
that's part of that process is striving for moments of difficulty and struggle with the awareness that that's what's going to build you into the person that you are meant to become. Without resilience, we break and we crumble. Right? You look at, I'm from Miami, we had hurricanes growing up all the time. The reason why every tree in my neighborhood is no longer there, with the exception of the palm trees, is that the palm trees, when the hurricane comes, they aren't trying to they sway back and forth. It's that ability to sway back and forth and to kind of get up when we fall that helps us. And we build on
that swaying is like that oscillating.
It's like the oscillating narrative.
Yeah.
But it's the personal narrative. Forget about the family narrative. It's the narrative of my life.
Yeah.
That my life is filled with ups and downs. And that doesn't mean good and bad. I think part of this process is
how black and white we've made it. Like,
and really just actively trying to disassociate struggle and challenge with negativity and bad. And it's the self-talk. It's the self-talk we do with ourselves, and it's the talk that we do with our children that becomes their own self-talk. Being able to talk about what it is that they're going through in a
that almost requires us to access those feelings also. So that's really hard.
That is really hard. It's all really hard.
Yeah.
But like all things that are hard, that's what makes us who we are meant to become. We can't grow into the people that we're meant to be if we don't go through the struggle that it's going to take to get there. And that's what we want for our kids. I think it starts with this awareness as a parent that I need to become more okay watching my children struggle.
I need to become more okay with my own struggles and failures. I need to be willing to take risks. I need to be able to have more distress or discomfort tolerance. And I think that enables you to,
it's true,
kind of model that for your children.
But it's not just the modeling or the absorbing. It's not just the osmosis. There's two parts of it. There's number one, what are we modeling for our children so that they can see and learn how to become resilient themselves? But then there's this also this huge piece of, we talk in Judaism about sor meirav aseh tov, right? You want to do good, but you also want to not do bad, right? Do no harm. And I think there's two components here when we talk about resilience. A big part of it is what we see now with the helicopter parents. So it's not just modeling so that they see how to be more resilient themselves. It's how do we not
get involved,
get involved in things that we shouldn't be getting involved in. Because it's the easy way out.
But what I'm saying is it's connected, because the reason that we swoop in is because we're uncomfortable
being in that discomfort.
Yes, and we're uncomfortable watching our kids be uncomfortable because we're uncomfortable with our own discomfort.
Yes, and then that's what I'm saying. It's the different two different outcomes of that same reality. Is we're not modeling for our kids because we're so uncomfortable with the discomfort ourselves, and then we're also swooping in and trying to save the day to avoid them having to go through any discomfort. And life's not going to be like that. So I think with the understanding that we can always change, just because that's what we may have done in the past, doesn't mean we don't have to do that moving forward. I think it's important for parents, ourselves included, to resist the urge of swooping in, even if it's just for a couple of minutes, even if a couple seconds. If I can count to 10 or 20 before I go through the knee-jerk reaction of trying to fix the problem, I'll give my child that ability to just sit in it and try to work through it. Kids come to us all the time. our children.
Right. They don't necessarily know how to do it. You have to.
But they they come to us with their problem.
Right.
And when we answer, or we solve their problem, or we give into the thing that they're asking for, often we're not teaching resilience. We're doing the opposite. I love this when we used to have the preschool years ago. And one of the things we would teach the teachers is that when a child, these were preschool kids, 4-year-olds, 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, when they would come to the teacher with a problem, the automatic response of the teacher is, what have you tried so far? And if you couldn't figure it out on your own, did you ask one of your friends for help, right? We want to enable and encourage our children to figure things out themselves because they're very capable, which will then build self-efficacy and resilience. And we want to teach them that if they are struggling with something, they need help, they can ask a peer. They don't have to ask the parent, the teacher, the person who they know is going to come in and save the day. Mm-hmm. We want to encourage our children and ourselves to not be the damsel in distress, not to have the automatic response every time we feel a slight amount of discomfort to throw up our hands and say, well, I can't do it.
Or somebody else saved me.
Yeah, those are one and the same.
Yeah.
I think when we throw in the towel right away and we say, I can't do it, the response is, well, someone's going to have to do it. Someone's going to have to fix it and save me, and I can't do it. And the more we give into that, the more we give our children the opportunities to sit in the discomfort and to struggle and to fail
safely, and
especially with things that are not going to be catastrophic.
Yeah.
Right? With little things, to give them the opportunity to try and to succeed, that builds the greatest amount of self-efficacy and resilience, because you can show them, look, you couldn't do this before, now you can. Mm-hmm. There's nothing that makes a child's face light up more than understanding that they worked really hard for something and they accomplished it. Basically, long story short, or long story long, resilience is really important. Resilience is the ability to sit in discomfort, and that's what's going to allow our
tolerate distress,
to tolerate distress, which will inevitably come into their lives. And I think all other areas of success are built on being resilient and building that muscle of being comfortable with discomfort.
Yeah, not like putting so much weight into a given experience or challenge or opportunity, because if it doesn't go the way that you want, it's not going to kill you.
But not only that, if it doesn't go the way you want, then it's probably an even greater learning opportunity than if it does.
That's a very hard place to get to. It's very, very hard. I'm just saying the first piece is to just not fall apart, or to just,
maybe working on that awareness that it's actually a good thing and it's a stepping stone to something greater helps you not fall apart. Well, the jury's out on that one. Thank you for joining us. If you have any insights, please feel free to share them with us. If you have ideas for future episodes that you want us to try and cover, send this to us as well. So thanks for joining us, and
have a good day.
We'll see you back next time.